And then these are some quotes here from Walter Russell, one of them in particular. He said, "All knowledge is possible for anyone in the cosmos, the universe, gives it to him who asks."
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Out of the Box podcast, where Steele and I, your host, get to talk about outside of the box ideas. Today, we have a special topic. We will be talking about prayer and how prayer has effects on our life, how you can use it in your life, um, and maybe some scientific aspects to prayer that we can kind of go deep dive into them. So before we actually start on the topic, I want to invite you guys to actually give us a like down below. And also, if you do enjoy our content, if you find it interesting, please subscribe. It's an opportunity for you to continue to get to follow us along this journey of discovering more about our life and hopefully providing some valuable content for you to improve your life and also to have a better perspective of the world. So without further ado, let's get started with prayer. So Steele, have you used prayer in your life? What is your experience with prayer?
Yeah, as a Catholic, yeah, I've used prayer in the past and all that sort of stuff. Use it in times of stress, in times of trying to, I guess, fix things in your life, maybe seeking answers.
Mm, yeah. Do you think your prayer life has developed over the time, or has there been something that you discovered that has amplified how you view prayer?
Yeah, I think it has developed in terms of like changing. Yeah, I would say compared to like middle school, high school, where it wasn't like it was more about just doing what authorities tell you in terms of what prayers to say or not say. But I don't think it really was until I got confirmed and they started talking more about how prayer is not about reciting things, reciting words. It's more about talking, having a conversation with this higher power. That I realized that prayer isn't what I thought it was or what I was taught before. Like because as a kid you're like, oh, I need to just repeat this because this adult is telling me to do it. But then as you get older, you start realizing the more of the meaning behind it. And then as I got to St. Mary's University and started my research project on God and theology and all the stuff about his existence and trying to prove it, looking at both sides, I started, learning, I guess, deeper insight into what prayer is and what it could be. And then I read stuff like Walter Russell, different philosophers, and dabbled here and there, I guess, about prayer, and then realized that prayer it can be more complicated than it seems on the surface.
Hmm.
So, yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, a lot of the insights to prayer really came to when I moved to St. Mary's University and lived there on campus, just because my life in itself was really paved by my parents, right? They told me to go to church, I would go to church. If they told me to pray the rosary, I would pray the rosary. But it came to college that I actually started asking myself, like, well, why pray the rosary? Why do this? Why do that? Right? And I think similar to you, what you were mentioning a little bit was, trying to find answers to why we do things, not just to do them because it's the right thing to do, but why is it the right thing to do? Right? And so that really brought me to a lot of questions and seeking and knocking. And I think it led me to discover some really interesting aspects about prayer that I did not know before. And it made me go deeper into the word also in the Bible and kind of finding some interesting connections between science and the Bible, which is really interesting because one of the neuropsychologists that I've kind of looked into it, or actually I've done some more research into it, is how in neuroscience there's this neuroscientist specifically. His name is Dr. Joe Dispenza, who talks about the alignment of the mind and the heart, right? How when one aligns the thoughts and the heart and they're in core aligned, then you can have a stronger wave of prayer. And so prayer is not something we can quantify most of the time. So it's kind of hard to put it into scientific terms. But we scientists like Joe Dispenza have found that there's actual waves caused from our being. There's actual waves that we're sending out when we have different emotions, which is why some people are able to pick up on, hey, I'm doing good. And it's like, well, it sounded like they weren't doing good. So we can pick up on social cues like that. There's different things that we're constantly expressing that the eyes and the ears and the self can't really perceive, but internally we have a sense of direction. It's almost like a gut feeling that we, I guess, perceive in a way. But talking about it more scientifically, there's actual waves that are going on, that our brain is producing different alpha waves, beta waves. And we kind of heard it a little bit more when we talk about sleep, right? That our brain is constantly in function. Um, but it's very interesting how, when we put, prayer in the sense of waves, then we're actually almost causing a ripple wave, right? Like when we drop a drop of water into an ocean or to a body of water itself, then it causes a ripple effect. And so we're actually almost producing, waves in itself, which is really interesting. And so, and I know Joe Dispenza talks about the alignment of the head and the heart, which in the Bible, it also talks about that, which is really interesting.
And Jesus
Jesus
talked
talks about, putting your mind and your heart together, and, you know, Jesus back then could not describe prayer like maybe scientists can do now, but, he was trying to explain it in the best way possible to what the people could understand at the time, that he was there, right? He was not going to go into deep scientific, research about why that form of prayer was the best. But since he was all knowing, and he was connected to God, right? Because he was God, he had that aspect of himself, right? That um he could describe things more colloquially so people could understand it during that time period. But what are your thoughts on that, Steele? What is that something that sounds kind of woo woo or uh
Yeah, sure. To some people, and I mean, to reasonable people, sure, it could sound kind of strange. It's another world. It's a whole other field of study. It's something that any reasonable person should be skeptical of. But I also like to just look at it with an open mind and just think about all the possibilities. And like for me, I just try not to shut anything out just because it sounds strange. I like to investigate. I'm an investigator. I'm not a
mhm,
shut this out kind of person. So it makes me think of a lot of things that Walter Russell says that I've read from the CIA being released documents, like the Gateway Experiment, I think it was called. I'll show that in a second, but you know, I think it was really interesting how the Bible talks about and Jesus talks about how the intention matters. And you mentioned that
mhm.
before about it's not just the words said in prayer, but the intention that follows. Um, you also said, Jose, that before this, that like in Genesis, in the Word of God, God didn't just speak the words, but perhaps there is some intention behind it.
Yeah.
That makes it.
It's yeah, it's almost, yeah, intention plus words created creation, right? So there was, a purpose behind the words in itself that caused creation to happen. It wasn't just the words. It was a combination of both, right?
Right.
And how does that play out in our life?
Well, in our life, I think several things from psychology could tie into it. So, like using intention with prayer, as you say, with words spoken out loud, you know, is self fulfilling prophecy. We've talked about that before.
Mhm.
Anyone who wants to learn
Yeah.
more about that can go on that podcast we talked about before, basically the idea real quick that we believe something and then that belief in our mind is strong enough to make us act in certain ways and the world responds back to us in those ways, and it's like a cycle of, and that ties with a law of attraction. You believe certain things, you might attract those things to you from the universe. So I think that does matter. The attitude you have, the beliefs you have, how strongly you believe in self-doubt, all of that. And then these are some quotes here from Walter Russell, one of them in particular. He said, "All knowledge is possible for anyone, and the cosmos, the universe, gives it to him who asks." That sounds pretty similar to the Bible, does it not? I mean,
Yeah.
I remember
Yeah.
something
I mean,
God said,
yeah.
like, ask and you shall receive.
Yeah. Seek and you shall find.
And he talks about the universal ego. You have to replace your ego with the universal ego. Because, like, what are the little things I've read and understood, minimal, because his stuff is complicated. Walter Russell, I still haven't fully understood all of it.
And to the people who don't understand, who
Yeah.
know who Walter Russell is, could just give him a brief summary.
Yeah. So Walter Russell's a polymath. He's a scientist, a philosopher, an artist who did sculptures and I think paintings as well. He was in the 1920s era, close to Albert Einstein, and he basically embraced science, creating scientific theories with God, and tying it directly with God, as he refers to as the universal one. He's published several books that are really kind of rare and hard to find. But that's just the idea of who he is. Nicholas Tesla was, I think, a friend with his, and there's a quote by Nicholas Tesla where Tesla said, Tesla's he's like a genius. And he said, Walter Russell should bury his works, bury his writings for 1,000 years because mankind will never understand them, kind of thing. Because he says it's too complicated. Mankind's not ready. Um, so I think that's interesting. The universal ego, connecting our mind to the universe. Prayers, I think, might be a way of connecting our mind to the universe. As you said, Jose, at the beginning, about
Yeah.
we project waves, maybe those ripple out in chain reactions to the universe. And so, real
Yeah.
quick, this is a CIA document I found a few years ago that was released in, I think, 2003. And it talks about the gateway, some type of gateway thing, where they were trying to understand whether intentions can affect the universe. I think it was something like that. So they looked at hypnosis, transcendental meditation. They look at all the different things, biofeedback, and then they talk about some concepts I haven't really heard, but some really strange things about. And it was a long time ago, but from what I remember, the main idea was uh, meditation and focusing your willpower and intentions to like affect the universe in some way. And then
Hmm.
you might say this is strange, right? This is all BS, right? But there was actually a scientific experiment done where people did meditation. These scientists had I think it was a control group, and they had professional meditators who had done it for years. And they had the meditators imagine the electron in some type of thing moving. They imagined affecting it in some way. And the experimental results showed a significant result that they were able to affect the electron with their mind. So,
It's kind of crazy, man. It's almost like that experiment where they had, and we kind of, I think, talked about this in our previous podcast, but with the water, right? They had one bottle of water in one side, another bottle of water in the other. And to one, they spoke really good things, positive words, you know, praise and everything that they could to say positive energy. And then to the other one, they said bad words, just bad intentions towards it. And when they looked molecularly at both sides, they found that the one where they said bad things was very disorganized. There was no order in it. But the one that actually had positive things said to it, it actually formed crystals, geometric shapes, which is so amusing, like so interesting because, you know, when we're going on our day to day, we just can't see this spiritual side of things, or maybe this transcendental side of things that is happening outside of our five senses, right? And but it's actually causing effects in the day to day life, right? And it makes me just think like, how a lot of people say, well, your unconscious thoughts can also affect how you live, right? How you are,
Right.
and the same way goes to prayer. I mean, prayer, it's like you said, if we define it, it's a way for us to connect to this higher power, to God, to almost connect also to other people, and which is what the Bible talks about. And maybe we can kind of connect it to the Holy Spirit, right? The Holy Spirit living within us, through us, with us, right? It's all around us. God is all around. And a lot of cultures talk about this, that the earth is connected to us, we live with the earth, and it's almost like this beautiful interchange with life and with other creatures, right? And seeing God not in just in the heavens, but here on earth as well, right? Like the blueprint of himself. um and so I think it's just really interesting, right, that
Yeah.
prayer can have that way of connecting us to something greater than ourselves, right? But there's also maybe a way of preparing to pray, right? Because I was reading this book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, and it's by Joe Dispenza. And there's this chapter where it talks about identity, and it talks about how sometimes we're acting upon what we want to show the world, what we want others to see of ourselves, but we sometimes use a lot of energy trying to show other people who we really are not, deep inside, right? And sometimes in that energy aspect can lead to not being able to be clear in prayer, right? Because uh I'm trying to also grasp my head around this as I speak, but it's almost as a way of being transparent in whatever you do, right?
Right.
Where it's almost like a signal, right? Like an antenna that's sending a signal to something else, right? To the world. But if you are using a lot of that energy for that antenna is being used for some other thing, right? That has no purpose in sending out the message, then the antenna won't have an enough strong signal to actually broadcast whatever it's
Yeah, I
trying
like
to
that
say,
metaphor. That's a good one.
right?
Makes
And
sense.
so if we don't fix that, then we can't really send out messages to
Yeah.
connect to the world, to connect to God. And so we
Yeah.
really have to work on ourselves sometimes to really clear up blockages in what's going on in our life.
Yeah,
um
that's what's hard, for some people is just to grasp it as such an abstract concept. They're like, I don't even know how to do it, even I want to do it. I don't even know.
yeah.
My final thing on that is I was just real quickly looking up that stuff, trying to find that meditation study, and I found other studies that were being done on other ones related to that, and I think that one as well. And there's like skeptics, so this is talking about skeptics talking about it, but they're saying something like they did a meta-analysis, which is in research you do a statistical analysis on like dozens of research studies on the same thing to see if there's consistency.
Hmm.
And they did do that on different experiments showing they call it psychophysical interactions. So when the mind is interacting and affecting the physical world, that meditation double-slit experiment I referenced earlier. And they said that, there were small significance, but it was still statistically significant and repeatable outcomes, it says here. So that means it was consistently found, not just in one experiment, but several. And it said this was
That it caused some
done for
effect.
years. It said 9 decades of research on this area have been consistent results on it. And this saying down here, just kind of wrapping up, like skepticism is important for science, but it's saying curiosity and exploration are equally important. So that we shouldn't just shut something out just because it sounds like it's fake. And what are your final thoughts on it?
I think that's probably the best way to wrap up this topic. You
Most
know, there's a lot of things that are out there that talk about, life just being reality in itself, and if you can't perceive it with your five senses, then it's not real, right? But if we're open to the idea and that there might be something else, something more, and if it's true, and it's kind of like what I was talking to you about still before we actually started the podcast. If the truth is the truth, then if even if you question it, and even if you try to play devil's advocate, the truth will stand out, right? And so if it is true, then you know it'll come out. And if it's not true, well, find that out, right? And so I think that's what's really interesting about the truth. We see all these things actually happening, weird anomalies, and like you said in that study, small changes, but small changes go a long way,
Same here.
right? Small changes in a repeated amount of time, continued over a certain amount of time, can become magnificent over that period, right? So I say all that to wrap up and say, let us know, guys, what do you think about prayer? Do you use prayer in your life? We would like to know that. See what's happened to you based off of prayer. Has there been any anomalies? We would like to know that. And we would greatly appreciate if you can write a comment regarding that. Also, subscribe to our channel and give us a like if you really enjoyed this topic. If you do, also let us know if you would like for us to provide more information about this. And if you guys have any questions, please also let us know down below. So until next time, we will talk to you soon. Take care.